Something that I've been meaning to do for quite some time has been figure out a two-handed energy blade build. However, realistically, to use a two-handed energy blade, you need some kind of justification. And that justification has shown itself with the new transfigured gem Molten Strike of the Zenith. This ability potentially has one of the largest more damage multipliers I have ever seen in this game, starting out with every 5th attack projectiles dealing 800% more damage. And with boosting some quality, we get this total up to 1280% more damage with hits and ailments. On top of this, Molten Strike of the Zenith fires 3 projectiles, as well as every 5th attack firing an additional 5 projectiles. We get 1 projectile from the tree, as well as 2 projectiles from a flask, meaning that we are firing 11 additional projectiles that deal 1280% more damage. But that's not it. Molten Strike of the Zenith has one other interesting feature to it. The way that it works with multi-strike is similar to the way that Ruthless works. And what I mean by this is that on the 5th attack, every single multi-strike hit procs the additional damage and the additional projectiles. Meaning that on that 5th attack, we're not getting 11 projectiles, but we are getting 33. And then on top of that, Molten Strike projectiles can return. So when we add in Nemus to the equation, we're up to 66 projectile hits. And that's with normal multi-strike. Now, there is a downside here, as there always is with these kinds of things. Unfortunately, it does require us to get to that 5th attack to be able to get our real damage out. The normal damage is okay, but it's nothing even close to what that 5th attack brings out. It is truly hitting the zenith. And to give you some examples, here is Uber Exarch with normal multi-strike. Here's Uber Exarch with Awakened multi-strike. And here's Awakened multi-strike with as many defensive mods as I could possibly manage to get on the invitation. So as you can see, we're kind of tickling him at first, but when that 5th attack comes out, it truly does some serious damage. Now, I'm still in the initial stages of this build, and while I've crafted most of the gear, it isn't finalized as is, but a video with my full thoughts will be coming in a few days. However, in the meantime, I wanted to give you a little bit of a sneak peek into what I've been working on. Now, if you're new to the channel, make sure that you subscribe, and without further ado, let's get into it. Alright boys, so this is my character, Mini Balls. And I need to explain a couple different mechanics before you'll really understand what it is that we're doing with this build, because it's using a lot of weird and strange and archaic mechanics that may not make sense to most people at a glance. Now, I've talked about Multi-Strike of the Zenith. That's this ability right here. It is a very, very powerful ability. It requires a two-handed weapon, and it does deal the vast majority of its damage on that 5th attack. I've kind of explained how it works with Multi-Strike and all those kinds of good things, so you should mostly already know how Multi-Strike of the Zenith works. However, there's one other thing that we need to talk about, and that's going to be Energy Blade. Energy Blade is a big source of damage for this build. It is essentially our weapon, right? Now, the idea behind Energy Blade is that it sacrifices a portion of your energy shield and gives you a very, very large elemental damage weapon when you do activate the ability. So you'll see here we're sitting at like 9,900 energy shield, and when I activate Energy Blade, we go down to about 6,500. However, we get this beast. The two-handed Energy Blade has a pretty fast attack speed, has pretty good base crit strike, and has an absolutely massive amount of elemental damage. This is all from our energy shield that we have sacrificed for this. And because we're doing lightning damage, it just so happens that the volatility support is absolutely excellent for this build. Beyond that, we're using some of the normal suspects: Awaken lightning damage, Awaken elemental damage with attacks, Energy Leech. We are a Trickster, so we get both effects of this most of the time. And then of course we have Awakened multi-strike or normal multi-strike. Now, I was able to do most of the Ubers and everything that I did like mess around with, at least in the initial point of this, with normal multi-strike. However, I wanted to grab Awaken multi-strike since this league, money just seems like monopoly currency at this point. It just doesn't seem real. You just have infinite amounts of it, and it's just kind of silly. So we went with Awaken multi-strike, and it's honestly pretty silly. Now, as some last notes about Energy Blade, one cool thing about Energy Blade is it doesn't really matter what your base weapon is. So you can just go grab a 6-link white sword of any kind. It doesn't really matter what it is, and it makes it so that you just have a 6-link white energy blade that you can put your main link into. So these two things combined allows us to have a pretty insane amount of damage that we're working with. So we're hitting anywhere from like 66 to 88 times, I think, with Molten Strike of the Zenith, depending on if you're using Awakened Multi-Strike or not. And we are doing that with an absolutely massive base amount of damage, scaled with all of our other things. Now, one other thing you might notice about the build that I'm using is I'm using a recently heavily nerfed amulet, Ashes of the Stars. Now, the reason for this is that 28% quality of all skill gems is actually really insanely strong for this build. So Molten Strike of the Zenith quality is 200% more damage with hits and ailments on that 5th attack for every 20%. As you can see, we've got 28% quality from global modifiers, that's coming from the Ashes, so that gives us an extra infinite amount of damage. On top of that, quality for Energy Blade is more maximum energy shield, so it reduces some of that less maximum energy shield like nerf that you're getting essentially to your character, to the point where it goes from 50 all the way down to 34, so that's pretty good. We of course also have this linked with Enhance. Obviously I could buy level 4, level 5 Enhance or whatever, I just had this sitting around and haven't really pushed all of the currency possible into this build yet, although I have spent quite a bit. Other than that, for the most part, it's a pretty straightforward, like, int stack, energy shield stack Trickster. There's not really a ton different going on here, besides one new mechanic that's happening with the new league. Now, somehow I have managed to just avoid playing basically any build with charms yet at this point, even though they're very strong, because I've just been using Warden of the Magi over and over again. So what we're doing this time is we are using Oath of the Magi, where it says defenses from equipped body armor are doubled if it has no socketed gems. So the idea is that since we are a Trickster and we have this node on our Ascendancy right here, which makes us that we get +1 to maximum energy shield per 6 evasion rating on equipped body armor, this node plus this node with a really giant evasion energy shield chest piece ends up for quite a bit of evasion and energy shield. So with all of that combined, we have a relatively tanky and relatively high damage character. Now, beyond that, I am using the new Adorned jewel. This is a pretty powerful jewel just in general. 125-ish% is enough, and I've been using these Corrupted Intelligence, Energy Shield, Ghastly Eye jewels. Those are just the easiest ones to roll. Although I have been getting unbelievably unlucky with my corrupts on this. I actually ended up having to buy quite a few of them because every single one that I made was just failing every single time, which was very sad, but it is what it is. Besides that, it's a relatively straightforward int stack tree. Obviously, this is going to be a little bit different because I'm using like a sword and I'm attacking, so we're going to have like some sword nodes and some like projectile crit nodes and such, so a little bit of weird stuff. We're also pathing down to point blank because it ends up being relatively good for Molten Strike. So there's some like weird peculiarities here, but for the most part, this is a pretty straightforward tree. There's nothing crazy going on here. So just so I can demonstrate it like here live on camera and such, I'm going to do an Uber Exarch. This is just, I rolled something that was like above 70 quantity essentially. It's got some pretty dangerous damage mods on this, you know, power charges, attack speed, movement speed, monster damage, chance to cause elemental elements, which I'm completely immune to, but we are going to do a boss real quick just so I can show you, you know, like a little bit of the build. So this is Uber Exarch, item level 85. So one thing that a lot of people don't know about Exarch and Eater is that if you kind of just like chill for a second here, they have this really large damage prevention mod on them that they start out with. So if you kind of just chill for just a little bit before going in and doing your damage, you'll notice I do like no damage, and then all of a sudden they just instantly die. That's the Zenith that they're getting hit with. So that's the whole idea behind this, is that you're kind of just like tickling them a little bit and then they just die instantly. But that was Uber Exarch with a bunch of dangerous mods. He's very, very easy to farm on this build because, you know, essentially he never gets to do anything. And you have enough evasion, you have enough defenses that he'll never actually be able to hit you before he dies there, essentially. So that's the idea, is that is Uber Exarch, and most of the Ubers kind of go the same way. Now, there are some Ubers where you're still going to need to be able to, like, play the game, right? Like, if you're playing against, like, Shaper or things like that, you're going to need to be able to do the mechanics. Maven, you're going to need to be able to do the mechanics and all of that. But for the most part, you do an absolutely insane amount of damage. So you might be wondering how just, like, general clear is. In general, I think the build really isn't super well suited to just random clear, right? Now, I've been farming simulacrums with it, and that's been going relatively well, but for just, let's see if we can make this a little bit more dangerous. For just random clear, okay, so this is avoid elemental ailments, reduce damage from critical strikes, and the rest of that is okay. I'll just show you a basic map here, right? So I can give you an idea. Now, you're going to swap out elemental damage with attacks with Ancestral Call support. This is going to make it so that you're essentially hitting like almost the entire screen whenever you're attacking. The major downside, I would say, of this build, at least for right now, I won't swap to Aureus in, is mainly just that it's not very fast, if I'm going to be honest with you. I don't have Energy Blade on, so yeah, I'm doing no damage. It's not very fast, realistically. The clear is relatively okay. Like, for a melee build, it's honestly not bad, like, at all, right? Like, you can hit quite a bit. Let's go ahead and I'll go and gather some juice real quick before we continue, and I'll see you in a second. So, I managed to get about 5,500 juice, which, unfortunately, this isn't really, like, a well-rolled map or anything, so I can't, like, super show anything off, of course. But there was some footage earlier on that you saw of like me doing, you know, wave 30 simulacrum and one-shotting, you know, Kosis and Omniphobia and such. So it's obvious that the build does okay clear damage. Go ahead and grab whatever, it doesn't really matter. But the idea is that the movement speed is probably the one big downside of the build, which means that Ubers are fine. You know, you can farm Ubers relatively easily. Things like Simulacrum is pretty much fine because you don't really have to move a ton in Simulacrum to be able to get 5 or 6 rewards consistently, especially if you're using, you know, Ancestral Call and just essentially hitting like everything on the screen at one time. But like normal map farming like this, I honestly don't think the build is super well suited to it, although it can do it, right? Like we can do 5.5k juice and take whatever map mods. You're not really going to be able to do a couple of them. Like, you're really not going to want to stack a bunch of negative resist, although, yeah, see, as soon as I took that, I'm taking a lot more damage here. But I didn't really make this to be a mapping character. Honestly, if you want a mapping character right now, I would say that the Kinetic Bolt, Kinetic Blast build's probably a lot better for that. But for a bosser, honestly, melee, but, you know, I kind of like this build, and it's something that I've been toying with the idea for probably about a week or so now. Unfortunately, I was on vacation, so I couldn't really, like, make the build as I wanted to, and by the time I got back from vacation, all of my money had turned to nothingness. I lost, like, 40% of the total value of all of my money just by, you know, like, leaving for a week, you know. So that's cool, although, like, the price of divines are dropping now for some reason, I guess, but you know, it is what it is. One big thing is that I do not have immunity to corrupting blood, but it looks like I was okay because I have an energy shield overleech. But yeah, kind of been rambling for a little bit, but that's pretty much it with the character. Now, I've already showed you Ubers, but I mean, I might as well show you the map boss as well. It's not going to be much different than what you'd see from like an Uber, because obviously even with like 5,500 juice or whatever, it's not going to be as strong as a, you know, like Uber with double or triple health or whatever you want to call it from that one clip that I did earlier where it was like less effective curses and gains ES. All right, so here's actually a good point. Bosses and enemies that just run from you are actually quite a bit of a problem. But yeah, I mean, obviously that's not going to have as much health as like a double, triple life empowered Uber or something. And that's going to be it for the video. Now, I've linked my character down in the description. There's a POV of just my character. It is not a build guide by any means. It doesn't have any of my normal stuff. It's not set up properly, like with the exact items that you should be going for or anything like that. It is literally just my character with my gear. Look forward to a guide. Loosely, I'm going to call it a guide because this is way outside of the normal budget of builds that I typically make. Look forward to that probably in a couple days, and then maybe a few days after that I might throw together a Mageblood POB. We'll see. Like I said, this league is basically just Monopoly money. It's just infinite. You can get it doing pretty much anything that you want. It just kind of rains from the sky, so you know, might as well throw some more money at stuff this league. So if you've really wanted to play a two-handed melee build that kind of has a little bit of a weird twist to it, maybe you could give this one a try. It seems pretty interesting. There's a couple other ideas that you could potentially do with this base setup, but Molten Strike of the Zenith seemed like the best use case for it. And remember, boys, if you enjoy this content, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos, and stay safe out there in raid class. And I'll see you guys in the next video.